Calling the recent protests "No Kings" is a whole new level of hypocrisy. And these protesters flourished at demonstrating their ignorance to people who have a good knowledge of the political systems in North America. Protests against who you don't like in the White House, who you don't like at 10 Downing Street, or who you don't like in 24 Sussex Drive. I am all for the freedom of speech, the right to assemble, and openly criticize your government. But where were the No Kings protesters when the shoe was on the other foot? Where were the No Kings protesters when the government arbitrarily shut down the economy? Where were the No Kings protesters when they shut down the right to free speech and the right to free assembly? Where were the No Kings protesters when they put people out of their business and shut them down? People gathered from around Canada and converged in Ottawa in 2022, and the Emergencies Act was being used to quell this rebellion of political inconvenience. Where were the No Kings protesters then? Where were the No Kings protesters when the government made the right to assemble or the right of movement throughout this country was limited to a medical decision? So where were they? Well, I'll tell you where they were. They were the ones demanding an increase to the power of the state in permanently incarcerating those who were calling out for the injustices or the infringements of civil and individual liberties. They weren't protesting for no kings then. They were protesting for no dissenters. They were arguing in favor for a king, not against one. Therefore, this No Kings protest isn't a protest against kings. It's against the king that they didn't vote for. I'm not saying that these No Kings protesters don't have a point, but they should call it exactly what it is, an anti-Trump rally. They aren't calling to dispense with the growing centralized power of the leviathan of the government and those overlords who control it. No, they're only suggesting that this centralized government power is in the wrong hands. If they truly meant no kings, then what they would really say is they want nobody in power. No kings means a process of abandoning a monarchy in favor of a democracy. No more endless wars, no welfare state, no gun control, no centralized banking system. It means no minimum wage and absolute freedom of exchange. It basically means rules, but no ruler. No kings means a principles of liberty and the principles of libertarianism, where the power of the individual is never taken over by the power of the government. And I believe that most of the people that are protesting in the No Kings protest are people that actually hate and revile absolute freedom. The original No Kings protest was that of the American founding fathers, people that signed their lives, sacred honor, and their fortunes to say that they actually didn't want kings. These are people like Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, James Madison, George Washington. They structured an individual republic that demanded individual sovereignty over the government, where it was people's responsibility to cast off the usurpations of a government that would impede on their natural rights, and where an elected legislative branch of government actually meant equal representation. They built their nation on the founding principles which were the antithesis of a monarchy. They based their economic principles on that of the Scottish Enlightenment and writings like Wealth of Nations. They built their legal precepts based on Magna Carta, natural law, and Sir Edward Coke's First Institute and Second Institute. These were the basis of the courts, limiting the powers of the monarchy. They built their objectivity of natural law based on the Bible. They also recognized that setting term limits on power was crucial in the hands of the executive on limiting state power. And I believe that this is something that we as Canadians maybe should consider in our parliamentary system. No king should be a protest against absolutism, but that's not how the three branches of the American government works. The three branches of government, the executive, the legislative, and the judicial, each has specified powers to limit the powers of the others. For example, the president can veto legislation. Congress can override vetoes, and the Supreme Court can judge a law as being unconstitutional. This system is crucial for maintaining a republic and the rights of every individual citizen. The problem with power is that it is a bipartisan issue. Every successive political leader tends to gain more power under the pretense of altruism. A true no kings protester would recognize that the problem with power is power itself, not who sits in the seat of power. Meanwhile, North Americans are simply stuck in a cycle of elections where the people remain the same, but the suits just change color. We go from Tweedledee to Tweedledum. We go from Kronos to Kang. Most of us understand that power corrupts, and the more power that you hand to somebody, the more insatiable the lust for power becomes. And as Lord Acton says, if power corrupts, then absolute power corrupts absolutely. The only objective solution to no kings is to restrict the power of government itself so that it doesn't end up in the wrong hands. And I think this is what most people are protesting against. They believe that the full power of the government is sitting in the wrong hands, but the problem is that people on the opposite side of the political aisle think that their candidate has the right power and the right to use that power to enforce their values. But again, the problem, the real true problem, is that this kind of power exists at all. And this comes down to the problem of being principled. Demanding that government use their powers to enforce your views over others, but then demanding that the same government not use those powers against you is not objectivity. It's not a principled stance. It's not based on logic. It's a childish misunderstanding of the nature of power and manifests itself in an emotional tantrum. It's like going to the ice cream shop and protesting against chocolate ice cream, but then supporting chocolate mint ice cream. It's also true, as Hans Hermann Hoppe wrote, that monarchies are actually more altruistic and better at delivering safety and value for the citizens rather than what all democracies tend to end up in, which is a bit of despotism. The only true principled and logical stance that one can have if they're protesting against somebody having power is to be against government power itself, no matter who it affects or coerces to act against their values. And this, as the Founding Fathers would say, is to rely on dangerous freedom rather than peaceful slavery. So it's not true that people want no kings, they just want the no king that they didn't vote in. So they want a parasite as long as it's their parasite to interfere in the lives of everybody else in the country. It's the abuses of euphemisms that display and spotlight people's political ignorance. I have no problem with the protest, but call it what it is. Don't say no kings and make people think that you want to abolish government, because most people in that protest are dependent on the very government they're protesting against. If you found this video to be helpful in your understanding of politics or economics, history, philosophy, or financial literacy, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for upcoming videos.